Hey guys, welcome back to the Jay Sit Down podcast. I'm your host, Jay, and I'm here today with Brack. He covers the Arizona Cardinals. They're out in Phoenix. Also host of the Phoenix Cardinals podcast. Bo, thank you for coming on today to talk about those birds out there out west.
Yeah, certainly not short on things to talk about during a rebuilding offseason. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. Yeah, so you said rebuilding. So before we get to that part of it, let's see how we got there for the Arizona Cardinals. Sadly, for you and Bird Nation there. But so can you just recap 2022 for us? For out there for the Cardinals, how it went, and just all the things that make the season, hit the toilet.
Yeah, man. Yeah, exactly. How long is this podcast? Because it was a long 2022 season. It was. I mean, it was interesting because, months before that, this team was 11-6. At one point, they were 7-0, 10-2, leading the NFC West. And then things collapsed like they did at the end of every season under Cliff Kingsbury. And, finally, this team wasn't able to get out of the gates hot. They weren't able to capitalize on a fast start. And things just deteriorated from the very jump of training camp. Players couldn't get on the field for whatever reason. You had the 6-game suspension for DeAndre Hopkins. You had Hollywood Brown, who, was caught speeding on his way to training camp. And, he wasn't disciplined by the league, but it was just kind of a black eye to the organization. There just seemed to be at every turn, a challenge and adversity for this team. And I don't think that they were necessarily set up to face that adversity and succeed through it. They certainly succeeded the previous season, but I think a lot of bad habits festered from people in the front office, not setting this team up to have a whole lot of depth, very top heavy. I mean, they had their stars, no doubt about it. They have Kyler Murray at the quarterback position, J.J. Watt, DeAndre Hopkins, but if those guys weren't available for some reason and none of them, outside of JJ weren't available for the 2022 season, you had to look to some guys who were barely even, starting capable players. So they lacked depth. They lacked a coaching staff with the ability to lead and to make the adjustments. And the Arizona Cardinals, they kind of were treading water for a little bit. And it looked like, after week 7 against the Saints, they had a big win on Thursday Night Football, could get back on track, and it just fell apart from there. And I think that was due in part to, obviously, Cliff Kingsbury being overmatched at the head coach position, a poorly constructed roster, and their stars just not producing like stars, and eventually Kyler Murray bowing out to the ACL injury in December. So it was just like anything that could go wrong did go wrong for the Arizona Cardinals, and they decided to hit the full reset button after it was all said and done. Said, okay, we got to, despite the extensions that our general manager signed in the offseason of 2022 and our head coach, they decided, hey, we realize that there's no path forward with these guys. So they pretty much gave a whole facelift to this organization, and the only person remaining feels like it's Kyler Murray. Sure, there's a couple people that came with him, but like who they're going to move forward with potentially feels like K1's the only guy. But it was a product of how brutal that season was to go 11-6 to 4-13. They were competitive, but it was just like it felt like this team was constructed by popsicle sticks and chewing gum. Like it was being held together. There was no solid foundation, and now I think they're in better hands to potentially find that and really lay a solid foundation in the very, beginning of a rebuild.
Yeah, that's a solid point you made there. Cliff Kingsbury was relieved of his duties as head coach. Could you kind of give us some insight as to why we had kind of have a general idea of why they fired him, obviously, but as far as, more in detail and, internal wise, why they felt that he needed to be relieved as head coach.
Yeah, Cliff Kingsbury, his first 3 seasons as Arizona Cardinals head coach, he was better than the previous season. There was progress. You could see it. He took a 3-win team, turned it into a 5-win team. Took the 5-win team, turned it into an 8-win team. Took the 8-win team, turned it into an 11-win playoff team. But you saw that at some point, I would say late in the 2021 season, the league adjusted. They caught up to Cliff Kingsbury. The things that he was doing that he was finding success in, the league diagnosed how they were going to, at least offensively attack Cliff Kingsbury. And he never played that game of chess. He never made those adjustments that he needed necessary to succeed. And I think that there was a ceiling to Cliff Kingsbury. I think obviously a failed college coach. There was a bit of where he was overmatched. Maybe had no reason to, or shouldn't be a head coach of an NFL team. And when he's 35-40 in the Big 12 with Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback, that's kind of wild that he didn't have much success there. I know that he obviously was handicapped with his defense at Texas Tech, but it showed. I think he's a smart NFL play caller. But as far as like a leader of men, you saw, it was on display during the in-season Hard Knocks that, Vance Joseph, the DC, seemed to be like the guy that was giving you the answers for why things weren't going right or what was going right. It was Cliff. There wasn't much substance to it. And, despite progressing each and every year, that progress stopped and was stunted. And I don't think that there was any real clear way that he could kind of recapture that. It was just caught lightning in a bottle. And then, we kind of got a glimpse of who he really is. And the league humbles people. And I think that's why it's tough to find in the NFL sustained success, because the league is always making adjustments. And if you don't, make the proper adjustments back, and Cliff wasn't able to do that, they can make a guy who looked like he had a bright future as a head coach and immediately chew him up and spit him out. And I think that that's what happened. And for him, is he the right guy going forward? I think there was enough to say, even in a season's time, to debunk the previous 3 seasons, that Cliff just wasn't the guy out of this. Maybe does he get an opportunity down the line from more of a veteran-laden team that doesn't need to have their hand held? Maybe. But it would have to be the right situation. As far as where the organization has fallen and how far it fell from grace, I don't think there was any way that Cliff was going to potentially be able to pull it up and get him out of the cellar of the NFC West and beyond.
Yeah, I agree. And being a coach in the NFL, obviously you're dealing with grown men, but also they have to be able to trust you. And really that's on any level of football or any professional or any sport in general. There has to be that mutual connection and trust between the coach and the players, and them being able to, we know these guys are going to put us in the best position to win. He's going to lead us, like you said, be a leader of the men, not just on the field, but off the field. I just don't think Cliff Kingsbury brought that to Arizona. So now he's not there anymore. But now moving on, they hired Jonathan Gannon away from Philadelphia, of course, being the defense coordinator there. Now he's the head coach. Although been hearing some wanky things as far as going around about Gannon. So what can you tell us from your insider information there?
I think a lot like Kyler Murray, from a national perspective, Jonathan Gannon is a bit misunderstood, and there's a lot of misconceptions as far as JG goes. You see the video of him meeting his players for the initial time. He's talking to Rondell Moore. He's doing the wacky zoom, explosives and all that stuff. And people, it's easy to poke fun of, but he every day he brings enthusiasm to his position, and it's more than just enthusiasm. It's a want to be successful at the head coach, and it's deeper than that. After covering Cliff Kingsbury, you ask him questions in the press conference about, why did you do that? And you wouldn't even get necessarily a straight answer, where I feel like with Jonathan Gannon, not only do you get a straight answer, he will tell you how he got to that answer and what they're doing. They have their why. They know how to get to that and how they approach it. And I think that they are a well thought out, critical thinking coaching staff that are under the radar, very young, right? Gannon's just 40. His offensive play caller is 35, and Drew Petzing, defensive coordinator, is 29. But I think these guys were all up and comers. These are all guys that are really they know what they're doing. They know what the assignment is each and every day, and they're able to explain things to their players or press members like myself of why and what they're doing. And I think that that's important. Not only their coaches, their teachers, and with a young team, I think that that's very key. I've really enjoyed so far the sample size that we've got from Gannon. I think things are going to. He told us this much earlier this week at the end of minicamp. It's like, he's confident that they did a lot in the little time since he got hired in February after the Super Bowl, and they're confident where they are now. But now they're going to ratchet some things up a notch, and come training camp, I think he's going to go from like, hey, I'm the new guy in the honeymoon phase, and we're all in this together, and we're excited, and we don't like the word rebuild. We're here to win games. But then he realizes the pressure and how serious it becomes and how tough that is, to where he's going to become kind of an ass kicker. And you can kind of start to see that change a little bit. And I just, you hear obviously from some Philly fans that didn't like Gannon and how things ended there and the tampering and all that. It's like Monty Ossenfort made a call to a guy to see if he wanted to coach his football team, if he was interested or they were going to move forward. It's really as simple as that. For people to say like what JG did impacted how he coached in the Super Bowl and impacted lives, that's a little hyperbole. That's a little dramatic for my taste. I think that he's a guy that was going to be a head coach. He was a rising star. He was a guy that general manager Monty Ossenfort identified the previous offseason and always wanted to talk to him, and finally got the interview. And now I think that these two guys are kind of lockstep together. And I really like the vision so far. We still haven't seen him on the sideline. We haven't seen him within the flow of the game. We don't know what JG's like there. But so far, so good, in my opinion. And I think the Arizona Cardinals, making one of the last hires of the hiring cycle, did land somebody with solid potential.
Yeah. So you spoke about the backlash that he received, of course, after the Super Bowl and the defense's collapse. Now, let me ask you this: with Gannon coming over there, after that, does that concern you a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that especially like what I said about Cliff. You see who Cliff is. Like, you're not going to know. Like, we're going to think this is kind of an experimental phase. Not I think that might be a little too harsh, but like, you're going to see Gannon with a roster that's not necessarily up to par in NFL standards. Like, their roster is not, it's at the bottom of the league. You're not going to necessarily know what type of head coach he is. Like, are they going to be in a situation against a team as talented as the Chiefs were in the Super Bowl to even have a lead to blow, so we're not going to get the glimpse of high pressure situations. Is JG coach teams going to be able to hold on to leads? I don't think that they're going to have the luxury of that. But if he can coach these guys up enough in year one to compete with a roster that's not maybe up to snuff, I think that that's going to tell you enough. Okay, there should be a little hope going into year two, and then the expectations rise, right? And I think that that's important. But like, as far as schematically, like what happened in the Super Bowl, yeah, I think that's a concern for anybody. But also, you have to keep in mind that Patrick Mahomes, at the end of the day, is an absolute beast, right? Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, the people that were beaten, they beat up on a lot of people. But it still doesn't feel good. Was an 11-point lead that they blew in the second half there. But also, you can take it to the different variables. You had a turnover. You had from your offense, you had a big punt return that put the Chiefs on the 5-yard line. So it's like 24 points that they gave up. They were also in a tough position. So not to give him a complete hall pass, but you also have to look at the entire body of work. His 2 years in Philly, I think that he proved that he's a talented defensive mind, or he's just a talented coach. 70 sacks. That's unreal. Like, it's, I think, insulting to a lot of football players to say that Jonathan Gannon can just roll the football out onto the field and say, hey, go get out to the quarterback, and they rack up 70 sacks. Like, sure, he had talent on his roster, but I think he put guys in a good position. It's simplistic, right? He wants to vary things up, but he also wants guys to know their role inside and out. Like, it's a simple approach, but guys are going to know on any given play where they have to be and what they need to do on that play to be successful and cover their man or cover their ground.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the big thing about it, man. So we'll see if he's the guy to to lead the Cardinals there out of the basement. But I mean, so far, like you said, I mean, they hired him for a reason.
Hmm.
So they obviously think that he can be the guy there. So we'll see what happens there. So as far as now, moving on that note, man, what do you think Arizona needs to do? I mean, as far as this season, obviously they're not going to be competing. Let's be
Right.
real. They
Yeah.
won. Sorry, Cardinals fans. I mean, we're just being honest. Here's what we do on Jason Down. But what would you like to see out of the team better that you haven't seen in the past couple of years?
Yeah. So this offseason has been kind of general manager Monty Osford, who took over for Steve Keim, who unceremoniously resigned at the end of the season. He had to clean up a mess, right? This roster was just in shambles. And he had to make some tough decisions, unpopular decisions, letting talented players like Zach Allen go get the bag from Denver. Byron Murphy, a talented corner, go to Minnesota, not match those offers, let talented players leave the building. Release DeAndre Hopkins outright, a couple months ago or a month ago, and make those decisions to kind of clear the path for the 2024 offseason to pretty much pivot, go any direction they want, cap wise, roster wise. And then, the number one assignment was accumulating assets, draft capital. And he certainly did that. I mean, they're going to have 11 draft picks potentially in the 2024 draft, including 6 within the top 3 rounds, including the Texans their first round pick and their third round pick, plus the Cardinals first round pick is going to be, you would think, top 5 to say the very least. I think that Monty Ossenfort did a real good job. And now, with that all being said, I think that there are some questions that can be answered this season with them not necessarily competing, right? Because we've already established pretty unrealistic, right? So I think you need to figure out, okay, who are going to be the guys that you can move forward with as your core, right? Is BJ Ujulari your second round pass rusher, somebody that's going to be a playmaker for you? Garrett Williams out of Syracuse, a cornerback. Is he going to be somebody when he comes back from an ACL injury that's going to be good? Like, are your players from this year's draft class, are they going to be part of, the studs that you tore this organization down to that you're going to build upon? Like, is it part of the foundation? And then you've got some holdovers from the previous regime, including Kyler Murray. And, there's a lot of, questions as far as Kyler Murray, when's he going to come back? But I think the people who say that he might not play much at all this season, I think that there's a lot of money invested in the Arizona Cardinals. The new front office, new coaching staff need to know, which Kyler is it going to be going forward. And him coming off an ACL surgery, and he's going to have a $50 million cap hit. If they're in a position to draft one of the top quarterbacks from next draft, do they want to move off of Kyler? They'll base that on what they've seen this season. If Kyler comes back and he's the Kyler of old and he's carrying this team, and they're like, okay, let's build around him, and we've got the financial flexibility to do so and the draft capital, or we want to move off of him. They trade him, take the $46 million in dead money, and draft the Caleb Williams, Drake May, and then build around those guys. It's they've got the options. So I think as far as this season, you figure out what you have as far as the players on the roster, and you figure out, what you have as far as the coaching staff too. Like, are they going to be able to match wits, play that game of chess schematically with the rest of the league, even with an undermanned roster, and see where they want to go from there. So there's a lot, obviously, to be decided and figured out this 2023 season.
Yeah, a lot. So you mentioned, the quarterback situation there. What do you? If it was you, like, I mean, if say the Cardinals end up with, most likely they will end up with a top 5 or top 3 selection this year, do you go with the quarterback, regardless of? I mean, because Kyler, man, I don't like what would you do? I mean, if a guy like that's available, do you take him? Caleb Williams, Drake May?
Yeah, here's what I'll say. I'm a Kyler truther. I love watching Kyler Murray play ball. Like, I think he's electric when he's healthy. He's a guy that can put a team on his back and he can carry him. As far as the question, like, if they have a top 5 pick, or if if they have the number 1 overall pick, they're having that conversation, right? It would be it would be misconduct for an organization. I don't care who it is. I don't care who your franchise quarterback is. Like, you have that conversation because Caleb Williams is that good of a talent, right? So I think as far as the Cardinals go, and you look at, Caleb Williams, a little bit better size than Kyler Murray at 6'1", not too much bigger, right? But 6'1", closer to your more traditional quarterback, but same skill set, right? Rocket arm, mobile, no ACL surgery to this point. So maybe there, and then you look at that. Even if you're eating $46 million in dead money, beyond that, you've got a rookie quarterback contract for 4 more years that you can build a team around. It's just, I think that there's a couple things. Like, if you hold the number 1 pick, whether it's the Texan selection or the Cardinal selection, you probably are going to, that's the scenario where you say, okay, we're going to pivot off Kyler. But if you don't have that number 1 pick, you're even sitting 2, you're sitting 3. I think that you probably decide to move forward with Kyler unless he comes back and he's a shell of himself and he just doesn't resemble the guy that he was. That was the offensive rookie of the year, Heisman Trophy winner before that, 2-time Pro Bowler. But I'm pretty confident he's going to come back and have a chip on his shoulder to prove all these haters wrong, and also get back on track with his game.
Yeah. I mean, Kyler is an electric player. Love watching him, especially when he was in, at Oklahoma. And then coming to the league, he was impressive. For the Cardinals those first couple of years. Unfortunately, the injury happened for him, so hoping to see him back on the field as soon as possible. Just as
it's
a
like
fan.
This conversation, like Caleb Williams, I think the Arizona Cardinals with the 2 picks had, like, I think I saw it was like the Cardinals' own pick is like 18% that they get the number 1 pick. The Texans pick is like 13%. So it's like close to 30%, like a 1 in 3 chance the Arizona Cardinals have the number 1 pick. Like, those odds are pretty good considering, right? So it's like, normally it'd be unrealistic to have that conversation, but there's a very good chance it could happen, right? And I think that the organization, with like the decision to move off DeAndre Hopkins pre-June 1st, just eat his dead cap money this year, is giving them they can, like when I said, they can pivot in any direction. They can pivot off Kyler Murray if they needed to, or they could go and keep Kyler Murray and, pay him with $50 million in a cap hit. He's going to be like, they still are going to have $80 million to spend next offseason. So they're in a good position to do whatever they want. And I think any organization would be crazy not to entertain the idea of Caleb Williams. But I think you have to be sitting 1-1 to really have that conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point you make there. So we will see what happens with the Cardinals. But a lot of people have been, mocking Caleb Williams there to, even it's like it was like, even after the day after the draft was over, man. Somebody put up the mock draft, like, all right, 2024, Caleb Williams, number 1 the Cardinals there,
Yeah.
So, but I mean,
it's not like Caleb or Drake. Like, there's a big fall off. Like, you can say what you want, like you saw from the kid from North Carolina, Drake May, but like he's not in the same stratosphere as Caleb Williams, and then you've got Marvin Harrison Jr. So it's like,
yes,
the Arizona Cardinals are sitting at 2, and there's a quarterback needy team that wants to give a haul of picks, and you trade down and you get, Marvin Harrison Jr. and you get a haul of picks. Plus, you got, they're in a good position for a very talent-rich draft in 2024.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens there with the Cardinals. But moving on, man. DeAndre Hopkins, you mentioned it a little bit before. Just talk about, just want to know, man, like what went wrong there in Arizona. I know he missed 6 games last year with the suspension, and then just obviously the team wanted to go a different direction. So can you tell us a little bit about that, and then where you think he'll end up?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's tough. It's become more of a polarizing topic, just because he was beloved. They thought okay, Larry Fitzgerald, he's Larry Fitzgerald's successor, going to kind of carry that coach of playing that position at a high level here in the desert. And he did, right? He came out of the, he was Nuke, who we knew and thought he was from Houston, right? And he comes out of the gates, 1,400 yards, target machine, making plays for Kyler Murray all through the 2021 season. And then 2020 season, then 2021 he hits out of the gates like still a beast in the red zone, still making plays, giving way to Christian Kirk and AJ Green. They're making plays on the other side of the field. And then he has like this hamstring injury. And like it used to be like if DeAndre Hopkins doesn't miss games, and then he starts to miss games. And then that's when things really started to deteriorate for this organization. And then he comes back from the hamstring, and then he injures his knee at the end of the season. It's like the DeAndre Hopkins, who doesn't get injured, has now gotten injured twice. And then it seems like, okay, he's got those injuries in the rearview mirror. He's rehabbing, and then he's got the PED suspension. He's popped. He's out for the 6 games of the next season. And it's just like all these things are taking him off the football field. And what we thought to be known as truths is DeAndre Hopkins doesn't miss time. Now he's missed half the games over the last 2 seasons for the Arizona Cardinals. And, Steve Keim, the former general manager, rewarded DeAndre Hopkins for the play that he had in Houston, and very rightfully so. He, at the time, was very worth it. But then that number just became too hard to take. It's a guy who's going to be 31 this upcoming season, and there are red flags as far as his availability and also, his cap number, and then his want, to be a part of a rebuilding organization. So, D-Hop didn't want to move off of his current number for his contract, and nobody should crush the guy for not wanting to do so, especially at his age and nothing guaranteed in this league. So the organization made the decision, like, okay, if they trade him after June 1st, if they're able to find somebody, and it didn't seem like they were able to, they would have split, his cap hits and dead money from 2023 and 2024. It would have been $11 million this year and $11 million next, but they wanted to clear that. So they just ate it, and they decided to make a business move and move off DeAndre Hopkins. There was no legitimate suitors for D-Hop throughout the offseason, and his market, I think I misdiagnosed it. I think general manager Monty Osborne probably thought he was going to get something in return. Unfortunately, it just never came. A deal never materialized. And it was just unfortunate that in order to really embrace the rebuild, they had to give up a guy who they thought was going to be an asset that would at least bring back more draft capital and more assets. It just never happened. And, as far as amicable, it was as amicable as it could have been, considering it just ended in straight up divorce. But, I think this fan base can still look back at his years fondly and then still feel like, man, I can't believe it ended how it did. But it doesn't sting just because, what's he going to do for this roster? They're more than a D-Hop away. And I think everybody recognized that. So they just tore the Band-Aid off.
Simply put. Simply put.
Where do I think he's going to go, though? Oh, man. I mean, did I hear I heard on the McAfee show today that the Titans, everything went all well and good, right? They have him there. Everybody's loving each other. And I hear he flew south. They flew him out Southwest. And it's just what are we doing here? This is DeAndre Hopkins. At least show a little respect. Get this guy an assigned seat or something. And then New England's got a 2-day thing. It's he doesn't want to play for a rebuilding team, but he's willing to catch passes from those quarterbacks in Tennessee or Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi. It's it's strange. So, I hope he lands with a team that's going to probably have a better chance of contending than those teams, because I think he still has some left in the tank, and he can be a complement to another big-time receiver. I'd love to see, a Buffalo or Kansas City, come into the play here, but who knows? I really don't. I mean, it seems like those 2 teams, New England and Tennessee, are the front runners, and barring anybody coming out of nowhere.
Yeah. Definitely been hearing a lot with Tennessee and New England there as far as Hopkins, so we'll keep an eye on that. But and of course, everybody when he first got cut, everybody was thinking about the Chiefs or the Bills, right? Same thing with Odell, and he is going to the Ravens. To go play with Lamar. So we'll see what happens. But Bo, thank you again for coming on the show today, man, and giving us your insight on the Cardinals there and what's going on in the desert and the situation, just all the situations going out there in Arizona. So hopefully, we'll get back to earth for you guys, and we'll see what happens for the Cardinals next year. But thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, anytime, man. It's always fun to talk ball and get different perspectives on what people are thinking about this team. And they're getting out of some dark times. There's still some dark times ahead, but I think that there's a light at the end of the tunnel for this organization, and they're finally going in the right direction. But thanks for having me on. Anytime you want to talk football, Cardinals, I'd love to come on again.
Of course. And Bo, tell our viewers where we can find you on your podcast there.
Absolutely. We're live every day on PHNX Sports on YouTube. You can check us at the live show 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And check me out on your socials at Bo Brack, Brack.
Yeah, make sure you guys do that. Good work he puts out there. So please make sure you guys check that out. And you can, of course, same here. Check us out here on Jay's Foot Down on YouTube and every other podcast platform. Again, Bo, thanks for your time, and we'll be talking with you soon.
Sounds good, my man.
All right, man. Take it easy.